Coming up on Network Africa, Nigerians return from Ukraine. Over 450 students fleeing the war return back home to Nigeria from Romania. Return tickets offered to Zimbabweans fleeing Ukraine. Thus, Burkina Faso junta appoints civilian prime minister. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke. Some relief for over 400 Nigerian students who were stranded in Romania while fleeing the conflict as they have been evacuated back home by the Nigerian government. They arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja this morning. The MAX air flight carrying the returnees landed at about 7 a.m. and they are the first of the many flights expected to return Nigerians stranded in various countries in Europe who are fleeing the war between Ukraine and Russia. Our correspondent, Kayla Megua, has been monitoring events and now gives this report.
The flight from Romania conveying Nigerians stranded there while fleeing from the war in Ukraine was built to touch down in Abuja at 3:30 a.m. Friday morning. As the hours went by, the media awaited any information on when the plane would arrive with the returnees. Finally, at about 7 a.m., the plane landed, carrying with it over 450 students and a few government officials. The welcome party, made up of several agencies of government, boarded the aircraft and addressed the returnees.
As you come down in two files, you will walk straight to meet with Ports Authority, and there the Health Ports Authority will give you forms to fill. We will only take your samples for the COVID test. As you are all aware, it was waived for us before you got on the plane. The moment that is done, you will be directed to immigration, and as soon as you are done with immigration, we will direct you to where you will collect a token of transportation for you to be able to head back home.
The chief whip of the House of Representatives, who was part of the delegation that went to Romania to bring back the returnees, says Nigerian foreign missions need to be better prepared for crisis situations such as this one.
Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, through the federal government, next time, going forward, should try to envisage some of these things as by way of emergency anticipation, so that when we are budgeting, we budget for the missions to be able to address these kind of circumstances whenever they come up.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs lays out its plan for the returnees, especially in terms of continuing their education.
Our government is already talking with the governments of Poland, of Greece, of Romania, and Hungary to see if those of them that are in their fifth year medical year, fifth and sixth year, can actually go back to universities in these countries to be able to complete their studies.
While the students are being profiled and tested for COVID-19, they would be given $100 each to return to their various destinations across the country. Kayla Megua, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, some of the returnees have been recounting their experiences since the crisis began and their efforts to get back home to safety. Our correspondent Kayla Megua caught up with them at the airport and also brings us this report.
The returnees from Romania have a story to tell, one which many young Nigerians may never experience in their lifetime. The experience of a full-blown war and what it means to have a refugee status outside of Nigeria.
But if she wants to return, it's your DG that is new.
Weary from their travels and traumatized by the idea that they could have been killed in the war between Russia and Ukraine, these over 400 young Nigerians, mostly students, tell us what it was like to escape the conflict.
We were struggling, people were screaming, there was like a lot of tussle to get across the line. I even saw someone climb over people's heads just to get like into the border. It was like really very stressful crossing the Ukrainian side of the border.
It was chaotic because everyone was fighting within themselves and nobody wanted to be the last to go. So it was very tight, so everyone was practically pushing. There was a lot of stampede. I have joint pain, back pain.
The sirens were like ringing every day and every day and every day, so that didn't make us feel safe, my friends. So at a certain point we left. We went to the Syrian border, the border bordering Ukraine and Romania, and from there we were able to like cross, but it was terrible.
An overwhelming sentiment among the returnees is the poor treatment they say they experienced from the Nigerian embassy in Kyiv, Ukraine.
We contacted them and we were like, we need like help. Like, what are we doing? What are we going to do? And they were like, students, take care of yourself, find a place that is safe. And that was strange to us because we were expecting that, maybe they will organize like a bus that would take all of us to like a border where we could cross from, but that was not the case. Maybe if the embassy in Kyiv gave like a special letter to all the borders, maybe Nigerians would have been able to pass more easily, but we weren't really getting like proper responses from them.
There's still so many questions about the impacts the war in Ukraine has had on people, but for these kids right behind me, they're just glad to be back home. Right now, they're going to be given a stipend by the federal government to ensure that they get to their respective destinations. A lot of COVID tests are going on right now, and they're hoping that these processes are done quickly so they can go back to their families. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Well, with many students still stranded in Ukraine, Romanian authorities have set up a temporary transit camp close to Bucharest airport to process refugees from African and Indian countries. According to government data from 2020, Ukraine was home to over 76,000 foreign students. Nearly a quarter of the students are from Africa, with the largest numbers coming from Nigeria, Morocco, and Egypt.
Our work here was to make sure that all the Indian students that are coming reach home safely. The embassy, the volunteers, and the Romanian government and the Romanian volunteers have been helping out a lot. Everybody has been safe here. They are getting food. We make sure that they get food and they are transported to the airport for their flights to India. Thank you, Romania. Thank you, Romanian people. And thank you, everybody who helped.
There were a few scares. I can't confirm anything for now, but before I left, everything was relatively calm. People were moving around, and I had to go to the border via Moldova to Romania.
Well, Zimbabwe is giving a two-way plane ticket to citizens who've fled Ukraine so they can return once it's safer to do so. Well, this is according to the Zimbabwe's ambassador to Poland, Germany, Hungary, and Slovakia, who says her embassy has been working with Zimbabweans in diaspora to help organize transport for those fleeing Ukraine until they reach the embassy in Poland. The embassy then takes over and is organizing their onward flights to Zimbabwe. Ms. Mashin Gaize says those who are fleeing have complained about racial segregation at the border, although Ukrainian and Polish officials have denied such reports. In the meantime, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has met with Russian Ambassador Vladlen Semivolos to discuss what he terms issues of mutual interest. He gave no further details on the meeting, but it comes at a day after Uganda abstained from voting from a UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. All 16 other African countries, including South Africa, Angola, Algeria and Mali, also abstained from that vote. President Museveni's son, Lieutenant General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, had on Monday expressed support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine in a tweet. other stories now. Despite representing just 17% of the world's population and emitting just 4% of global population, Africa stands as the most affected continent in terms of climate change. Environmental experts at the ongoing 8th African Regional Forum for Sustainable Development in Kigali say African economies are losing on average 5% of GDP because of climate change, increasing up to 15% in some countries. Well, during the opening ceremony, UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed says there is a need to scale up and speed up investment to protect people and ecosystems at the front line of the climate crisis. Our correspondent Ayola Kasim has more.
Available assessment of the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 implementation progress indicate that most African nations are off track to achieve the target and set goals of the 2 development blueprint within the set time frame. But Africa has shown its willingness to overcome and prevail over its complex development challenges. Delegates here at the opening ceremony of the 8th African Regional Forum for Sustainable Development have been told that now is the time for the continent to build on the big wins, especially now that Africa hosts the next climate change conference later this year.
Africa needs to be compensated justly through market mechanisms. We can create 360 million jobs. We can get $3 trillion off of our carbon because we are saving the world. This is the victory that Africa needs to take to Sharm el-Sheikh.
Highlighting 5 priorities that could help inform deliberations in Kigali, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General says there is a need to accelerate gender equality and economic transformation.
We are far from where we need to be. Debt to GDP ratios have risen to almost 70%. Today, 17 African countries are at risk of debt distress, and 4 are already in debt distress. The Secretary General has appealed for a serious reform of the international financial architecture, which shamelessly favors rich and punishes the poor.
To support the green growth in Africa, the Rwandan president says the African Continental Free Trade Area should be used to promote the adoption of sustainable technologies and infrastructure.
We have to own and lead the process and support one another. That's why these 2 development agendas are so important. It's about ensuring the stability and prosperity of our continent so that our young people can have the future they deserve.
This forum capitalizes on Africa's Decade of Action, which is a critical decade to reinvigorate the continent's pace to attain the SDGs, realize Africa Agenda 2063, and fulfill the Paris Agreement's ambitions. The road to achieving these objectives is somewhat difficult, but many delegates say their priority is to ensure that building the Africa we want does not remain just a slogan. From the Kigali Convention Center in Rwanda, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Burkina Faso's military junta has appointed Albert Ouedraogo as the new transitional prime minister. Mr. Ouedraogo, a 52-year-old economist, is said to have experience in management and public administrations, development projects, and private companies. According to a decree from the military, he is expected to form a government whose main task will be to secure the country from an Islamist insurgency that has killed thousands and forced at least 1.5 million people to flee their homes. Colonel Paul Henry Sandraogo Demiba was on Wednesday sworn in as interim president of Burkina Faso for 3 years after seizing power in a military coup last month. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. When we return in just a moment, global demand for Africa's developers hits an all-time high. That's on our Africa Tech segment. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. A Tanzanian court has freed the chairman of the main opposition party after the prosecution indicated it had no interest in pursuing charges against him. Mr. Freeman Mbowe was arrested in July 2021 in the northwestern port city of Mwanza alongside other Chadema party members and has been in detention since then. They were about to address a public rally to call for constitutional review when he was arrested. He was facing charges of terrorism and economic sabotage, which are not bailable under Tanzanian law. Last month, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan met Chadema's leader Tundu Lissu, who is in exile in Belgium. There were speculations that Mr. Mbowe's release was among the issues discussed, although this was never officially confirmed. Bridging the gap between farmers and factories is a huge step in the right direction when it comes to improving agricultural yield, which will in turn build economic resilience for the country. Well, this is the view of Nigerian-American agricultural entrepreneurs and co-founders of Relief, Uzoma Ayogu and Ikenna Nzewi. The duo seeks to relieve and ward off incessant uncertainties amongst players in the agricultural sector. They also believe the Nigerian agricultural sector presents limitless opportunities for young people to invest.
We found that a lot of people focused on, improving yields for farmers. A lot of people are focused on more capital to factories. But between the farm and the factory is really the gap we found. And these factories aren't able to get enough quality input. So that's really where we play. Palm is our first crop, but there's certainly other opportunities where that farm and the factory gap exists. Actually, always trying to get the really smart people I know to kind of move back and either, work with us or go and start something, because we need more capable, committed, courageous people to work here. And I think people are like, oh, you're still working on that? And then people are like, wow. So constantly encouraging people to come back, and the sooner you get here, the better, and the compounding you can enjoy. And we really do fundamentally believe that we are in this decade and the next are so crucial for Nigeria's development. And so if you can be on the ground and be part of shaping the nation and the future, there's no telling what type of future we could kind of build together. So that's kind of what I tell people, and that's what I truly believe.
We believe that, we as Africans were excellent in agriculture in the past, especially in Nigeria in the 60s. We had a booming agricultural sector. We actually used to be the largest exporter of palm oil in the world. And so what Relief is doing is actually returning us to those roots of agricultural prominence. It's not saying that, we're starting from zero, but we're actually returning to where we were before, because we can do what we've done in the past again.
Also catch the full interview with the co-founders of Relief. Do watch Diaspora Network on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. A 2021 report by Africa Developer Ecosystem released by Google states that Africa now has 716,000 software developers, a 3.8% rise in 1 year. 50% of these developers are concentrated in Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, and South Africa. The report shows there's an increased global demand for remote tech talent, which was accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, creating more remote employment opportunities for African developers. Nigeria led the continent in churning out tech talents, adding an estimated 5,000 new professional developers to its pool in 2021. Fred Oyetayo, the CEO of Fresible, joins us now virtually to discuss these findings and what it means for the continent's ecosystem. Thank you so much for joining us, Fred, on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, these are indeed great strides for the Africa's tech innovation sector. And from the statistics by Google, those with strong programming skills in web and mobile app development are in high demand. What are the possible implications of this for the continent?
Yes, it's quite a great stride for African developers. And one of the major implications is just to show that Africans or African developers can compete with their global counterparts. What they can do, we can also do over here. And it's showing that As the time progresses in the future, it's very possible for African developers to also occupy significant position in the tech ecosystem globally, just the same way India was several years ago with their booming tech industry. And you can see that currently the CEO of Twitter, the CEO of Google are from India. So it's very possible that over the next couple of years, it's possible that Nigerians also can occupy such important positions in the global tech economy.
Well, from the reports, we see that there is an attraction of developers to international opportunities, and this does not, favor the local ecosystem. So what happens when developers begin to, tilt more towards the big economy?
Yes, so it's important to note that local developers or developers that are currently settled in Nigeria or anywhere in Africa, they earn more by working for companies outside Africa. Because by the time they convert how much they are earning into their local exchanges, you can see that it's significantly higher. So as time progresses, it's very, very much possible that a lot of senior developers in Nigeria will prefer to work for foreign companies than to work for local companies. And in terms of implications for the big economy, we're also seeing situations currently where where a developer has more than one or two jobs at the same time. So he has maybe a permanent job, and then he's probably also working as a freelancer in two other companies just to ensure that he makes enough money. So in terms of being a freelancer, it's going to profit both the company and also the developers at the end of the day, because companies are not able, most especially local companies are not able to afford the senior developers, can maybe use them for a specific time period, just on a contract basis, maybe as a freelancer, and then pay them. And at the same time, those senior developers can as well work for foreign companies.
Well, as much as, developers are looking internationally, there's also the strong demand for developer talent here in Nigeria, with significant support from big tech companies and startups. Now, what do you think? Will this unlock more opportunities for developers who, in turn, can grow the nation's economy?
Yes, of course. If you are earning significantly higher than you used to over the time past, you have more money, disposable income. You can use such money to improve your community, people around you, your family. You can get to invest in more business. The higher you earn, the more disposable income you have at the end of the day. So in terms of building Africa's economy, I believe we are currently in the best part, with most of the senior developers in Nigeria working for foreign companies. They're earning more. They can get to do a lot more. They can also invest in local startups. They can invest in also senior big companies at the end of the day. So I believe it's a win-win situation for African economy.
All right, and just finally, before I let you go, what is the role of tech regulators and enablers, in all of this?
Yes, so I believe tech regulators and maybe enablers just need to provide an enabling environment. So take, for instance, the situation where there is no adequate electricity supply right now. People are trying to queue up to get fuel. Remote workers, they thrive working in a systemic environment, in a system that works. So in situations like this where they need to go and queue up for fuel, there's no electricity for them to be able to connect to the internet, and also for them to be able to participate in the global economy, it's really going to affect them. So what tech regulators and enablers can do is to provide enough infrastructure for the local developers to grow, and also in turn maybe introduce computer science into the curriculum to ensure that we build and we get more developers over the time consistently. Yeah.
All right then, Fred Oyetayo, CEO of Feasible, thank you for speaking to us on Africa Tech.
All right, thank you for having me.
Back in 2020, when South Africa went into a strict COVID-19 lockdown, a local company pressed on with opening a hotel with a difference in a tourism hotspot. And 2 years later, that gamble is paying off. The hotel is near a 100-year-old train that sits on a Selati suspension bridge, which spans a river in the heart of the Kruger National Park.
When South African businesses were under strict COVID-19 regulations in 2020, a local tourism company saw an opportunity against the odds right in the middle of the famed Kruger National Park. Built over the Sabi River and on top of the suspended Selati Bridge, Kruger Shalati, the train on the bridge, offers guests the chance to enjoy wildlife from the comfort of their rooms.
Ever since we opened, we had lots of guests who will be extending or guests who will be returning. And that don't normally happen with lodges that have been around for a long time, but we've been having that in the first year that we opened. So that tells you that what we're offering is something that guests want and something different, something that people haven't experienced before.
Opened amid lockdown restrictions that negatively impacted the tourism sector and saw many businesses shut down, the old and restored train has 24 carriage rooms with plummeting views of nature, a dedicated wildlife viewing deck, and a swimming pool jutting out beyond the train tracks.
I have to say, when I started looking at it, because when I came here, a lot of things were not even done. It was not even looking as good as you see it now. And then they gave us a date and they say, this is when we're going to be opening. And during that time, I'm looking at it, most lodges are closing or they are already closed. But we are saying we are going to open and then we're going to start running the business in that way. I thought we were taking a very big risk. I never thought we were going to operate and have guests coming in here during that time.
The Kruger Shalati has also been a lifesaver for locals in need of jobs amid the country's record high unemployment rate of nearly 35%. Since taking off, the hotel has employed almost 200 people. But the success has not been without hurdles. The business has lost 20% of revenue since the emergence of the Omicron coronavirus variant late last year, as many international tourists cancelled their visits. With travel restrictions now eased, visitors' numbers have picked up again.
And that's it on the program today and for the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.